That image on Monday night was brutal. Tyreek Hill writhing on the sideline with his lower leg clearly out of alignment, trainers cutting a cleat off, teammates and family rushing down from the stands. Whatever the immediate emotion, shock, relief that he was responsive, fear about what the scans would show, the practical reality now is simple and urgent. This is a serious injury that could meaningfully alter Miami's season and Hill's short-term career trajectory. First, what we likely just witnessed medically. When a broadcast shows the lower leg pointing the wrong direction and trainers cut a cleat off, that's classic for a dislocation or a major knee structural failure. A dislocated knee is worse than a torn ACL alone. It often involves multiple ligaments, ACL, PCL, MCL, LCL, and it can sometimes threaten blood flow to the lower leg if the popliteal artery is compromised. That's why immediate hospital evaluation and imaging are standard procedure to rule out vascular injury and to determine the full scope of ligamentous and soft tissue damage. Until MRI and exam results are released, nobody should assume specifics, but the images from the field and the fact he was hospitalized overnight are not encouraging. Recovery timelines vary wildly depending on findings. If it's a simple isolated ACL tear, modern reconstruction and rehab often put elite players back in 6 to 9 months, sometimes faster. If the injury is a knee dislocation with multi-ligament reconstruction, rehab is much longer and more complicated. Return to play can stretch out to 9 to 12 months or more, and outcomes are less certain. If there's vascular involvement or nerve damage, that's a medical emergency and can extend recovery indefinitely. Bottom line, there's a real chance Hill misses substantial time, and the full calendar for a comeback won't be known until surgeons and team physicians complete their work. What this means for the Dolphins on the field is immediate and strategic. Tyreek is not just another receiver. He's the team's premier vertical threat and a genuine game changer. His speed forces defensive coordinators to change coverage shells, creates space underneath for other playmakers, and opens up the deep ball for the offense. Losing that single element forces schematic adjustments. The offense will need to reallocate targets. Jalen Waddle, if healthy and still in the fold, or whoever Miami's next WR option is, must absorb more target in deep zones. Defenses will be less stretched vertically, meaning the Dolphins might see more bracket coverage and heavier boxes in the run game. Play calling will shift. Expect more reliance on quick timing routes, play action boots, screens, and using motion to manufacture mismatches rather than vertical shots. The coaching staff will need to be creative to replicate the no safety over the top pressure Hill creates. Roster moves are almost inevitable. Miami will have to lean on its depth chart, more snaps for the existing receivers, potential promotion of practice squad players, and possibly a short-term free agent pickup. The team might also consider schematic changes to involve tight ends or running backs more as pass game options. Beyond X's and O's, this changes the Dolphins' plans for both the short and medium term. There's the injury management question: how conservative will they be with surgery timing? The salary cap and personnel angle: if Hill's injury is severe, does Miami try to trade him later when he's healthy? Unlikely. Injuries reduce trade value. And the psychological factor for a roster that's already been under the microscope this summer. For a club that hoped Hill would be a central answer to any offensive inconsistency, losing him, even temporarily, is a huge adversity test. There are also league-level ripple effects. Teams that were considering trading for Hill, if those really existed, will see his market value fall immediately due to injury risk and uncertainty. Rival defenses preparing for Miami this week will now pivot game plans, and for fantasy owners and bettors, this is an abrupt change. Projections, lines, and expectations all shift when a player of Hill's caliber is potentially sidelined. From a career perspective, Hill is at an age where recovery still looks promising. Elite athletes have come back from severe knee injuries and returned to high performance, but the margin for uncertainty grows with any multi-ligament or dislocation-type trauma. The timeline for his return will shape off-season and contract discussions. A long-term absence this fall could factor into how the Dolphins and Hill's camp approach the future. What to watch next? The MRI report and any surgical recommendations. The team's official injury update. They'll be careful with language early on. whether Hill is listed on the short-term IR or placed on injured reserve, and the roster moves Miami makes in the coming days. Also watch for interviews with the medical staff. Vascular clearance or lack thereof would be very significant, and internal practice reports about who's stepping up in the interim. For now, the sensible posture is caution. The visuals were frightening, and the immediate response, cutting a cleat, stabilization, hospital observation, was appropriate. Fans should brace for at least several weeks of uncertainty and prepare for substantive changes to Miami's offensive identity in Tyreek Hill's absence. The best case scenario is that scans show isolated damage that can be addressed surgically with a predictable rehab timeline and a return next season. The more sobering scenarios could mean extended recovery and a tougher road back. Either way, the next 48 to 72 hours of medical updates will be the most revealing. Miami. The Miami Dolphins night ended with a scary scene and a serious cloud over their season after star wide receiver Tyreek Hill left Monday's game with a traumatic knee injury. Hill, who had been a focal point of Miami's offense and was having a strong game with 67 yards through 3 quarters, was tackled near the sideline when a defender fell onto his leg. Broadcast cameras captured Hill on the turf with his lower leg appearing misaligned. Training staff quickly entered, cut off his cleat to properly stabilize the limb, and loaded him onto a cart. Hill was taken to a local hospital for imaging, evaluation, and observation and was expected to remain overnight, Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel said after the game. The team listed him as out for the contest. McDaniel described the injury as a dislocation. The team provided only basic updates after the game, saying Hill was in the hospital and further information would follow once doctors completed testing. The broadcast reported that Hill's mother came onto the field before he was transported to the locker room, underscoring the gravity of the moment and how quickly the mood shifted, despite Miami's 27-21 win over the New York Jets. The injury robs Miami of its most dynamic playmaker at a sensitive time. Hill, who posted consecutive 1,700-yard seasons in 2022 and 2023 after being traded from Kansas City, struggled last year but had started 2025 with renewed production. Through Miami's first 3 games, he totaled 198 receiving yards, and Monday's performance suggested momentum might be returning. The timing of this injury complicates not only the Dolphins' on-field plans but also longer-term roster considerations. Hill was the subject of trade speculation during an up-and-down 2024 and early 2025 stretch. For the Dolphins, replacing Hill's speed, route running, and explosive playmaking is a tough assignment. Miami's receiving room will need to absorb immediate snaps and targets while the medical staff determines the full extent of the damage and an expected recovery timeline. At present, there have been no definitive statements about surgery or how long Hill might be sidelined. The team has said it will provide updates after imaging and physician evaluations. The injury also raises questions about Miami's short-term outlook. The Dolphins, who were 0-3 before Monday's victory, depend heavily on Hill to create big plays that open up the offense for quarterback play and the running game. Without him, Mike McDaniel and his staff must quickly retool game plans and find ways to sustain the vertical threat that Hill typically supplies. As the Dolphins process the initial medical reports and plan next steps, Hill's health will be the storyline to watch. The team's performance over the next weeks will hinge in part on how it responds to losing one of the NFL's premier playmakers and how Hill's recovery progresses in the days ahead.